Hello and welcome to a special presentation of the Fusion Syndicate. Things are going to be a little different tonight. While usually in this spot you'd find a review of a movie or television show or even another review, tonight I'm going to be reviewing a contest of reviewers' reviews, judged by reviewers who also make reviews when they're not busy reviewing other people's reviews. Let me start over. For the past 9 months, I have been a participant in Geekvolution's contest, Who Reviews the Reviewers? In fact, many of my more recent projects have been entries in this single elimination tournament. And now that we've come down to the final round, with 3 remaining contestants out of the original 8, myself included, it's time to take a look back at the contestants, the judges, the challenges, the highs and lows of Who Reviews the Reviewers. It all began in the fall of 2010. The YouTube channel known as Geekvolution and its proprietors, Captain Logan and Vince, were just approaching the achievement of reaching 1,000 subscribers. To celebrate, they assembled a team of reviewing judges and a $50 Amazon gift card sponsored by Pop Culture Comics, and sent out the call for reviewers willing to put themselves through the ringer. Out of the 24 2-minute audition videos, only 6 were to be chosen. But at the last moment, they pulled out a wild card, the first of many, by expanding the lineup to 8. Watch this review: Shades at Night, Tori GNR1, The Evil Professor, LaserDude99, Mr. Corellian, the G-Man of EAP, and yours truly, MistareFusion. And while it's true that each of the 8 did have varied review styles, or varying ages and of varying nationalities, what the judges might not have realized upon first choosing this particular batch of 8, might not even realize now, is that each of these reviewers' styles happened to pair up with another's. Mr. Corellian and the G-Man of EAP were both unscripted hosts who presented their topics by delivering directly to the camera, forging a personal connection with their audience using very little, if any, cutaways. Watch This Review and The Evil Professor, who both commonly review action figures, made use of the first-person camera style, making their subjects the focus of the video, with only their hands visible to express their own characters. Tori GNR1 and Shades at Night operated exclusively from the shadows. I still have no idea what either of them looked like, not even their hands. They narrated off-camera, letting still frames from their movies, games, or comic books take center stage. And finally, LaserDude99 and myself used a combination of talking directly to the audience with cutaways to video footage. So with such a wide variety of styles, would it be possible for any one competitor to maintain a clear advantage over everybody through the entire contest? Well, the first challenge was indeed a toughie. Review an everyday household object. And, knowing their audience, they made sure to specify that it could not be anything geek-related. LaserDude99's video on the VHS video cassette won high nostalgic praise from the judges, as did Shades at Night's review of a pair of scissors, and The Evil Professor's rather tactile lesson on a household water sprayer. Both Tori GNR1's overview of the plunger and my rather esoteric 30s film strip on the fork received very mixed reviews, although the real Manos, who appreciated the Citizen Kane nod in mine, gave me my single vote for Top Banana. I made it a point in the future to keep attempting to appeal to his knowledge of classic films. In the end, Mr. Corellian's review of his lamp won the judges' praise, and he was the recipient of the very first Top Banana award of the contest. He really played to his strengths on this one, using his on-camera audience connection to really sell the virtues of this lamp. In fact, most of the high marks he received were due to his honest salesmanship. In the bottom 2 were the G-Man of EAP and Watch This Review. The G-Man of EAP's performance in his review of a table was deemed less than compelling, and Captain Logan in particular seemed to take it quite personally that the G-Man of EAP's humor in the video might have been making fun of the challenge. Watch This Review chose a unique tactic for the round. Rather than make a new video, he chose an existing piece of his work, a review of Pepsi Throwback. Although he adamantly claims that he was given permission to do so, the decision might have worked against him in this case. The judges also criticized that he used a personal blog style rather than focusing more on the facts of the product. It was a close vote, but at 3-2, Watch This Review was the first contestant to be sent home. As the first contestant gone, Watch This Review had quite a few strong reviews of his own, about his brief stay on Who Reviews the Reviewers. Quite frankly, there's no real way to evaluate a reviewer by a single challenge anyway, given that each reviewer has different proficiencies and will shine more in some challenges than others. The requirements for that round were also somewhat vague. I recall the judges complaining that most of the entries weren't what they asked for. I imagine the judges were more than a little out of their depth at the start of the competition, since they likely weren't used to reviewing people. And maybe I was just licking my own wounds, but I do recall feeling the same way at the end of that round myself. While I do consider it easier to have more specific direction, I'm not necessarily against a broader topic, but to be vague and then to criticize that things weren't what you asked for seems more than a little unfair. And while I didn't necessarily disagree with the criticisms against the G-Man of EAP's video, I did feel that Captain Logan's response was more personal than professional. But all in all, I was pleased with what I had done. My real strategy at that point wasn't necessarily to be the best of that round, but really more to go out of my way to stand out from the pack, make a lasting impression, which I think I did accomplish. Now that I had a better idea of what the judges were looking for, I felt much more prepared going into round 2. Round 2 required the remaining 7 contestants to review something that they didn't like, although to open with a positive. That's certainly more specific than round 1's challenge. I had 2 main goals going into this challenge: to be more critical and to be geekier. Seeing as how both my audition video and my first round challenge had nothing geeky in it, I felt it was time to prove to them that I could be just as geeky as the best of them. And my review of Superman the movie The Ending went over extremely well. Vince in particular noted the exhaustive amount of facts, and while Captain Logan wasn't initially sure of the viability of the topic choice, he claimed it almost made him want to go back and reevaluate his own score for the film. High praise indeed. It's possible that Mr. Corellian was trying to show his geeky prowess as well, but unfortunately his review of The Last Airbender did not go over as well as his previous video. Since he's primarily an action figure reviewer, maybe this wasn't what he was used to. But there's nothing wrong with the guy on top taking a risk. Tori GNR1's review of Sonic Unleashed was seen as an all-around stronger entry than his previous video, making him safe for this round. And the Evil Professor's review of the Shark action figure played to his strengths: action figures and humor. Due to my taking Manos' vote for Top Banana once again, that left LaserDude99 and Shades at Night to tie for Top Banana that round. The former with his review of the animated feature The Invincible Iron Man, and the latter with his almost scathing review of X-Men 3. Unfortunately for the G-Man of EAP, that meant he couldn't dodge the bullet a second time. Although in between rounds he had made an apology video for offending Captain Logan, his choice of Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace was seen as cliched, his thoughts unorganized, and his positive, John Williams' score, was also seen as predictable, which meant he was the next one to be sent home. I must admit though, I am a little surprised that I didn't win this round. Not that I'm trying to brag or devalue the awesome videos of LaserDude99 and Shades at Night. It's just that out of all the rounds, this is the only one I can recall where I didn't endure a single piece of negative critique during the deliberations. Even in later rounds where I'd actually win, I'd never come through completely unscathed, so that's the only reason I mention that. Also of note this round is how quickly so many contestants, myself included, took the first opportunity to jump back to comic book related material. Out of the 7 entries, 4 were in some way comic book related, with the other 3 definitely falling somewhere into geekdom. And it's very interesting just how inspired people get when told to rail on something they don't like. All in all, it was a very successful round. Now, as far as surprises go, I don't think round 3 can be beaten. For that round, our challenge was to review something that was at least 10 years older than ourselves. Now, given the different ages of the contestants, that'd been a different time bracket for each of us. And given our different backgrounds, I'm sure the challenge meant something different to each of us. When the deliberations for that round came up, for example, Vince guessed the challenge was right up my alley. In a way, he was right, but that also meant it was vague enough that for the first time, I had no idea what I was going to do until the very last minute. I still consider this challenge the hard one. Mr. Corellian, like me, had an idea to go much farther back than 10 years before his birth and reviewed the book Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he remained safe. The Evil Professor scored big points by reviewing Night of the Living Dead. Tori GNR1 mixed the requirements with more comic book geekdom by reviewing a compilation of early Spider-Man stories, and also remained safe. Shades at Night's Superman 2 review was seen as a bit untimely after I had just tackled the first film in the previous challenge, but he was also deemed safe. But here's where the surprises came in, at least for me. I suspected that I might be voted off that round for my review of the Billy Wilder classic Sunset Boulevard. But although I received some criticism for the structure of my review, I ended up being voted top banana. And also extremely surprising to me, LaserDude99's review of the James Bond film Dr. No resulted in his dismissal from the contest. In my opinion, it was a much stronger review than his top banana winning Invincible Iron Man video. But in general, I think those surprises are what made round 3 good. Every video was incredibly tight. It was the first time I felt really unsure of how it would play out, which just speaks volumes of the competition. For his part, LaserDude99 had no regrets for his time in the contest. He agreed with most of the judges' judgments and felt that his time in the contest helped to strengthen his ability to do scripted reviews. For me, round 4, the challenge being to review an album, was the exact opposite of round 3. See, when it comes to bands, I don't have a lot of broad knowledge, but that just meant it was really easy for me to decide what I was going to do. And with 4 sharp competitors remaining, having a level of certainty going in is a good thing. To be sure, though, it was probably an area that none of us had ever tackled before in our videos. Shades at Night's 30 Seconds to Mars was well received, and he was safe. Mr. Krellian had been going through some changes at this point, having received a new HD camera. However, he hadn't quite worked out all the bugs, leading to his review of Queen's Night at the Opera to have some technical glitches like out-of-sync sound, but he was safe as well. I'd like to take a break for a moment to talk about the judges themselves and the roles they played in the contest. They all fell into a certain niche. Captain Logan assumed the role of unofficial ringleader, naming the challenges and leading the discussions. Vince and Browncoat Eric brought a sense of fun. In fact, I had a hard time telling their voices apart at first. The real Manos, often teased by the judges for his advanced years, brought a restrained wisdom to the table. But everyone agreed, and by everyone I mean Mr. Krellian, the evil professor, and myself, agreed, that the review spot was the hard judge, the judge who was almost impossible to please. In my nightmare sequence opening round 5, where I made a loop of all the judges' criticisms of me, I definitely had a lot of the review spot to work with. Before the 3 of us talked on the subject, we had assumed he had it out for each of us specifically, before realizing we all felt the same way. Aside from needing a critical rundown of the judges, I say this because it was thrilling, I say, to receive positive feedback from the review spot for my review of the Beatles' Rubber Soul. And the cartoon footage, which he exceptionally praised, was only a last-minute addition to the video. I again won top banana for the challenge. The evil professor and Tori G in R1, both strong competitors, ran into trouble, however. The former kept the zombie theme from the last round and reviewed the soundtrack to Evil Dead the Musical. It is difficult doing an album with that style of review when your product isn't visual and the only physical thing to hold is a CD case. It had worked for his last review, but it fell short this time. And the latter's review of Jimi Hendrix's Axis Bold as Love was deemed not specific enough, lacking elements like a track-by-track critique. In the end, unfortunately, and by a very close margin, Tori G and R1 had to go, and we were down to 4. Whether by design or happenstance, now that we were down to half of our original number, we'd been pruned so as to have only one of each of those 4 review styles I'd mentioned earlier. It was a trend I'd been noticing, and even though it was probably a coincidence, I had been using that trend to attempt to predict how each round would go. And while I wasn't necessarily sure who of each pair would survive to the halfway point, my hypothesis did seem to turn out correct. The announcement of round 5 brought with it something that should come as no surprise to fans of the series by now: a delay. See, we were in mid-December by this point, so the judges decided to hold off on the due dates until the beginning of the next year, due to the holidays. But even so, the deliberations didn't come for weeks after that. The challenge itself was devilishly clever. Review one of the judges' reviews. And each judge picked his own contestant. The other judges were surprised, and I admit I was a little disappointed, when the real Manos chose Mr. Krellian over me. In fact, nobody picked me. I was handed over to Geekvolution by default. It's like gym class all over again. But overall, I was pleased with the results. With little in the way of editing I could do with this topic, I decided to have a little fun with the concept by shooting an intro showing the psychological decline that would lead me to review my judges in the first place. It was another big risk for me, as I figured I had about a 50-50 chance that the jokes and over-the-top delivery would either work or completely fall flat. But it seems that I wasn't alone in my approach. In fact, having a tongue-in-cheek attitude ended up being the deciding factor for this round. The evil professor's review of the review spot also contained a lot of poking fun, and Mr. Krellian went so far as to style his review after Who Reviews the Reviewers and suggested that the real Manos had bribed him, a joke that the real Manos decided to play along with. In the end, my review of Geekvolution's Batman Begins review won me top banana for the third round in a row, both because of its humor and its critical analysis. All things being equal, we were all on our top critical games that round, but Shades at Night's review of Browncoat Eric was the only entry to not run with the playful humor the rest of us had injected into our own, and so, sadly, he was voted off. I kind of went into that challenge with an expectation of getting eliminated. I agreed with most of the criticism I got for that video, with the exception of that I was only just beginning to play the game, which confused me. I loved the contest. The only time I felt completely satisfied with my review was with the Review Something You Hate challenge, which ended up also being my biggest success. There was also another departure from Who Reviews the Reviewers, as the review spot was missing from deliberations, although it didn't have any impact on the results. This time. For round 6, the top 3 remaining competitors were pitted against each other in direct competition and cooperation, as we had to stage a joint review of the same thing. Now, considering that both my competitors are primarily action figure reviewers, and I am not, I was afraid that at least one of us would end up with some kind of advantage over the other, depending on what we ended up choosing. Now, I didn't want to boycott an action figure if they really wanted to do one, but on the other hand, I really didn't want to do one. So we ultimately decided it would be most fair if we chose something that was completely cold, something that none of us could have possibly seen before. To that end, we chose the Green Hornet film, which was out in theaters at the time. Part of me hoped that each of us would happen to have a different level of Green Hornet experience, so that we could each bring a distinct view to the table. But all of us were essentially neophytes when it came to the subject, and that worked out well enough too. And we had a great time doing it. However, as we ended up talking about after the review, Mr. Krellian and the Evil Professor are both unscripted in their general work, a trait I admire, and I had a hard time imagining doing a scripted review, while my work is pretty much the exact opposite. I meticulously write, shoot, and edit everything, and while there was little work I had to do on this, that also meant that aside from that one night of discussion, the final product was really out of my hands, which was a difficult concept for me. While I'm not one to shy away from public speaking, I did spend much of my adolescence combating a pretty severe stutter. It's mostly taken care of now, but it does tend to flare up when I'm either excited or nervous, and in this case I was both. Excited to be engaged in this conversation, nervous because of some technical problems that I thought might jeopardize my end of the recording at any minute. And while about 10 minutes before the review started I did sketch out a few notes of things I wanted to make sure I didn't forget to talk about, might have been a mistake to mention that, as the judges seemed to really take hold of the opinion that I meticulously scripted out everything that I'd said, sort of falling back on my usual methods rather than playing along with the idea of an impromptu conversation. But for the moment, the next moment, the moment after that, I was able to put it all out of my mind, because while the video itself was posted in February, the deliberations weren't going to come out until May. The longest hiatus ever. And this is because Browncoat Eric was in the midst of a big move, something I can relate to as I finished up a big move myself, right around the time the near summer deliberations for the winter video were posted. Now, as bad as this sounds, it's tough being the front runner in the middle of a competition, because you know you have nowhere to go but down. And you have to wonder how long your luck's going to last before the law of averages begins to weigh against you. And while I wasn't entirely sure about my performance in this round, I didn't expect to do nearly as badly as I did. The Evil Professor, who had nearly been voted off only 2 challenges ago, won nearly a clean sweep for Top Banana, his first time to finally claim the prize. And I certainly can't argue with that. For the first time, I didn't get a single Top Banana vote. I'd even lost the real Manos, who had consistently voted for me from the very beginning. With Mr. Krellian receiving the remaining Top Banana vote, it seemed my time was finally up. Never had a tally been so stressful. And sure enough, for the first time, I'd be receiving votes to be removed from the competition. Ultimately, the judges came to the decision that while I had the greater wealth of information in my discussion, Mr. Krellian was more at ease in carrying himself in that discussion. Which was more important in this round was the real question. Vince and the real Manos leaned more toward content and voted off Mr. Krellian, while Browncoat Eric decided on performance and voted me off. While the other judges joked with Captain Logan, who was the final judge to weigh in, to make things easy and vote off Mr. Krellian, a sentiment I can't honestly say I was opposed to at that moment, he too decided performance was more important and also voted me off, leading to the first ever vote-off tie. See, once again the review spot was absent. Had he been there, things might have turned out quite differently. Unless he voted completely against the pack and decided to vote off the evil professor, he would have had the deciding vote, which means one of us would have been gone. Who would have thought that for the hard judge, his most significant impact in the direction of the contest would be due to his absence rather than his presence? Well, anyway, with a deadlocked vote, Captain Logan ultimately decided not to vote off anyone, and proceeded to let all three of us continue into the final round. Whew. Getting off the hook by sheer luck was not something I was proud of. If ever I was untouchable, I wasn't anymore. The pressure was on for all three of us. Each of us had been voted top banana at least once, and each of us had received votes to be taken off at least once. But in the end, our performances in the previous rounds weren't going to matter. The only thing that was going to matter would be Round 7! You know, I had a feeling the final round would be something of a freestyle, and hey, I was right. Well, sort of. It's actually more of a jazz riff on Round 6. See, once again, we're all doing the same thing, and once again we get to choose what we want to do. But unlike in Round 6, instead of doing a joint review, we're all making our own separate videos. And for the first time ever, there's no time limit. And it was my bright idea to suggest, hey, why don't we review the contest? Which is why I'm talking to you all now tonight. So what happens next? Who knows? Will the review spot make his triumphant return to the judges panel? Hopefully, I'll win and get to use that sweet prize money to finance my purchase of the final 2 Dragon boxes. If not, I'll have no choice but to make this review very scathing. Retroactively. Somehow. It's been a wild ride for all of us involved, and it's been a learning curve filled with scheduling problems, technical problems, and ideas evolving as the contest has gone along. It's been a lot of fun, and I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of great people. Most of the misgivings I had about the contest after the first round have been improved upon substantially. But what about next season? Well, what I'd say would be the biggest possible improvement would be much stricter and more specific challenges. While I thought all the challenges were fun and exciting, I think it would really encourage the creativity if at least a few of them were extremely specific. Create a whole laundry list of criteria that needs to be met, from the simple to the insane. Or if varying technical capabilities of the contestants is a problem, make a list of criteria and demand that at least this number of things must be met. Reviewing an album is definitely a challenge, but what about reviewing an album that's 30 to 35 years old, runs at least 29 minutes long but no more than 34, and the review must somehow contain the color red and a monkey? More importantly, though, would be a list of general criteria on which to be judged, which ties in with that. The first round did feel somewhat blind in that regard. Some objective criteria, content, presentation, performance, research, for example, would go a long way to letting your contestants know what's expected of them before the first round deliberation bombshell drops. So the story's not over yet. 3 walk in, 1 walks out. Who will it be? Well, I wish the best of luck to Mr. Corellian, the evil professor, and of course, to me. I wish me lots of luck. Just remember to stay tuned to Who Reviews the Reviewers to find out. And regardless of the results, you'll continue to find me here doing what I've always been doing. Whatever this is. Good night. I'm doing a mirror shot wearing mirror sunglasses.